In the gospel today, we have the rich man who steps over the poor man at his door every day on the way home and doesn't feed him and doesn't take care of him, doesn't even probably recognize or even see him. And going all the way back to the first couple centuries of the church, again, one of the great preachers in the church, St. John Chrysostom, talked about the connection between not being able to see Christ in the poor and not being able to see Christ in the Eucharist. Right? If we're not able to, basically what he was saying is if we're not able to see in another human being the divine presence, then how can we see or believe that bread and wine become Christ truly present as well? And I'd like to reflect on that link today. And we are in the midst of a crisis in the Catholic Church. In the fact that a recent study was done, and this isn't the first one, and this has been known, this general idea has been known and has been talked about for decades. But the crisis is that for the people, the Catholics that are under the age of 40, only a quarter of them believe that the bread and wine become Christ at Mass. And that is a huge crisis. That is numbers suggesting and hinting at an absolute implosion of the faith in our country, right, over the next couple of generations. You keep carrying that out. If that 25% is now passing it on at that same rate of attrition, then a generation or two from now, there won't be hardly anyone left believing that Christ is truly present in the Eucharist. And that's really the reason. Obviously that's a crisis. I don't think I need to say it, but the reason that's a crisis is if that's not Jesus in the tabernacle, we should all go home. And a lot of people that don't believe that that's Jesus in the tabernacle have gone home. Right? They have gone home. And so this is a crisis. And we've been operating in that, and we've been trying, I think, in our parish, in our diocese and elsewhere, we've been trying to start taking steps to do things. We've done a lot of things here to try to respond to that crisis. That, again, this study wasn't the first one that let us know this. Right? We've had lots of opportunities and have added Eucharistic adoration. And we have that now every day, every Thursday, for the most part, an opportunity to come and see the Blessed Sacrament exposed. We've left our church open with a sign letting people know, parishioners and non-parishioners know, that they're welcome to come and pray in the presence of Christ in the tabernacle 7 days a week, right? Lots of other things that we've done throughout. I'd like to just reflect on a couple more things to focus on or think about with regards to that crisis of not being able to see Christ in the Eucharist and that connection to not being able to see Christ in the poor. And I want to reflect just briefly here for a moment about something that happened to a former parishioner of ours, Gary Gretter. I don't know how many of you know Gary or knew Gary and his wife Sandy when they were here. Gary and Sandy moved to South Carolina, I think about 2 years ago, to return closer to their son. Both Gary and Sandy their health was declining. And Gary passed away a couple of months ago, but someone sent me a video of Gary's funeral, which took place, again, about a month or two ago. And one of the most amazing things, I only knew Gary as the guy, we talked a lot, right, and had a lot of great conversations. And one of the main thing that I knew about Gary was that he loved to catch bluegill, and then he would fillet them and then throw them in the freezer and try and make sure that I was taking fish home on a regular basis. Super humble man, super, just down to earth. I had no idea about, but long story short, he was a lieutenant colonel in the Marines. And his funeral video, we posted it on our Facebook page. Someone made kind of a short little version of video footage of it. There was a Marine band. There was about, 60 Marines in their dress with their weapons and everything, marching in a parade behind Gary's horse-drawn. There was a horse-drawn hearse that carried his casket, and that the burial took place in Arlington Cemetery. Another parishioner, Brian Gilmartin, called me after he had seen it. And Brian is a former Marine as well, and he said he thinks that Gary actually had received the Congressional Medal of Honor because even JFK didn't receive a Marine band. Like, I guess that having a band, the Marine band at your funeral is some really special thing that only happens for particular people. But it was one of the, again, I just sat there stunned watching this 5-minute video, this highlights, clips put together from the service. These 6 Marines, again, who are also obviously in their dress fatigues and so forth, carried his casket, and they found they were pretty big guys. And the 6 of them carried the casket all the way up to the place of burial. And just the whole thing. I mean, I beg you to go see it, to go watch it again on our parish Facebook page, Twitter. We send it out there too. It's a stunning thing. And I don't think hardly anybody that sees that would walk away with a dry eye from that. There was so many things about it. I just want to call our attention to a couple things. One of the things that I think, well, let me say this. If you watch that, you know something special is taking place, right? That everybody there is reverencing the body of Gary, right? There's not one person that would walk by. I don't care if that person is from the farthest country away and this is their first day in the United States and they don't speak English and they don't know anything else. They would know that body under the flag, the casket under the flag, is what everyone's looking at. It's why everyone's there, and it receives the reverence of everyone that's there. And it's a very serious thing, and it's a very neat and beautiful thing at the same time. Everyone would know that, right? And you will know that when you watch it. There is precision in the movements of all 200 soldiers, or how many ever, 100 soldiers that were there. They were dressed in their best gear. They were serious about what they were doing. There was a ritual that all of them knew. Every single one of them knew exactly what was happening, right? And I think sometimes and obviously I'm making a comparison here to what the Mass can be, right? And I think a lot of times one of the big knocks against the Mass, particularly among our younger people who, again, are struggling to know that this is really Jesus, is it's just too stiff, right? The Mass there's just too much ritual. I think everybody that go watch that service, what we see in that ritual is that it's better that way. It's so much more amazing that all 6 of these casket bearers are in exact lockstep, and every movement happens at the same time without a word. The flag is folded. It is crisp. Every single muscle movement is already planned. It's more beautiful that way than if somebody said, "Hey, Bill, what do we do now?" But yet that's what the Mass is, a ritual that's come to us for 2,000 years, where everything is precisely done and has been given to us. St. Paul even said that. He said, "I'm handing on to you what has been handed on to me." That's what the Mass is. It's the ritual that's been handed on to us for how to treat the body and blood of Christ. And yet so often people are like, "Oh, it's so stiff." Well, I invite you to imagine it and re-understand it, not as worse or more boring than what would happen if we all just got together and decided what to do 10 minutes ago, but better than that. Beauty in the ritual. Help your kids, help your grandkids, help your godkids, your godchildren understand that, right? We're going to something, and there is a ritual to it, and that's part of the beauty of it, because this ritual is 2,000 years old. If you want to, there's lots of other times to do Bible studies and prayers, and you want to, have your own prayer life, come into the church when it's open. You can do prayer rosary, whatever you want to do on your own time, right? And that's a great thing to do too. But this is beautiful. And it's all focused on the body and blood of Jesus. It's not focused on me, unlike some places and some denominations. It's not focused on you. It's focused on Him. And that's why we're here, right? And so I think some of the things to take away in looking at that funeral, one of the things that I think that I'd like to say is I'd invite us to think about, and again, these aren't in particular order, and I'm not a priest who sits around and thinks about what people wear or look at people about what people wear, but there was a real power in the fact that those Marines were wearing their best gear. That was part of what would signify to a person who's never been here before and had just landed in America seeing them dressed in their best gear was part of what helped everybody know and would help you know if you were watching, whoa, this is different, right? And in a way that if they were all wearing their own stuff, would it still be beautiful? Would it still be prayerful for Gary? Would people still be there if they were all wearing their own stuff and flip-flops and shorts and whatever? It would be, but it would lose a lot. And it certainly wouldn't suggest to a person who doesn't know what's happening, it wouldn't be as powerful and it wouldn't send as strong a message that this is really something special and awesome. And so we have to treat, I think, our young people, think about it in the sense not just of ourselves coming to Mass, but I think part of the crisis is also recognizing I need to maybe do some things and change my life in the way that I approach Mass in order to help signify to other people that this is a really big deal. Right? So I think thinking partly in the sense of I also need to think not just about myself. Is God still here regardless of what clothing I wear? He is. But there might be some teenagers that see us approach things in a particular way, and if we're doing it in a certain way, they're not going to know that this is why we're here and that this is a really big deal, and that He's why we're here. So we might want to think a little bit more about it beyond ourselves too, not just what do I want to wear, but what might help other people that are visiting our parish, or our teenagers who apparently 3/4 of them who don't get that it's that it's Jesus. What might I do or wear or approach Mass in order to help them know, right? Another thing that I'd like to say a little bit about that with regard to movement and something that I think can have a really powerful impact. The Church asks us when we come in and out of church to genuflect. And I think there's a real beauty and a power in that. And I've seen that decline. I don't just mean here at this parish, but just everywhere, right? The Church says that when I come into and out of the presence of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, that the appropriate response is for me to lower my right knee to the ground. And when people see that, the non-Catholic that's visiting, the teenager that has no idea, if he sees or she sees over and over again people coming down to their right knee as soon as they walk in and before they leave church, that starts to drive home to them, this matters. Something is here, and maybe even what we're talking about with God being here is here, right? And so I think sometimes it's gotten to be a custom where, people will bow and that kind of thing, and that's nice, but that's not what the Church asks. And in fact, the Church also says anytime if we're moving side to side in a church and we cross the center aisle, we cross the plane, if you will, of the tabernacle. So if I'm over here and I'm just setting up for Mass and I go that way, I should genuflect to the tabernacle, to my right knee to the ground, right? Now, if we have serious health issues, obviously there's prudence involved, right? But I read one time a beautiful article about a guy who converted to Catholicism by watching an elderly person take about a minute to genuflect who was in serious pain. I'm not saying that the Church calls us to that, but I think there is a real beauty and value in that. Sometimes I think people you can certainly do that, but sometimes people will wait until they get next to their pew and then they'll genuflect, right? But I think it doesn't, the Church, first of all, asks us to do it when we come in, and also doing it by our pew, that's certainly, again, fine. But I think then some people maybe don't understand what we're genuflecting to, like that we have to genuflect before we get into our pew, whereas in reality what we're supposed to be genuflecting to is the presence of Jesus Christ in the tabernacle. The Church actually says during Mass, when there's a procession going on, so I'm supposed to genuflect when I come up into the sanctuary at the beginning and end of Mass when I leave, but that the servers and I are supposed to bow to the tabernacle when we're moving in a procession, so as not to break the flow of the procession, but that everything else that we do, we should be genuflecting to the tabernacle. So something to think about with regards to that. And then the final thing that I would like to add into this, and I haven't had the opportunity to do it. I had hoped to, but I missed the deadline for the bulletin. So it happens to the pastor too, in case you're wondering. But I'd like to have us, anyone that would like to do this, I'm going to always return back to the sanctuary after Mass and with my mic still on, lead us after the music is done. Lead anybody that would like to stay in a prayer, 2 prayers. First of all, one of them just kind of reflecting a little bit on the presence of the Blessed Sacrament of Christ in the Eucharist and giving thanks for that. And then also leading us in anyone who would like to participate in a St. Michael the Archangel prayer, whose feast day is actually tomorrow as well, September 29th. It's a very common prayer that many people pray at the end of after Mass. So I think that also helps people see, if it just kind of turns into conversation time within the church, I think our younger people, that sends a message to them that, whereas if people hit their knees and say a prayer of thanksgiving together. So again, if you want to leave after Mass, that's totally fine. But just know that for the foreseeable future, I'm always going to be returning and leading anybody that would like to stay in 2 prayers. One, hopefully, again, helping drive home the reality that Christ is present in the Eucharist and St. Michael the Archangel prayer. And so again, we have this beautiful passage from Jesus today talking about recognizing the poor. And so I think what we need to be doing is stepping up in regards to how we're helping our young people see Christ's presence in the Eucharist, and then also that will obviously transform them and help them see his presence in the poor as well. I know from my own life, when I became aware that Christ is truly present in the Eucharist, I suddenly stopped doing what Abraham did in the gospel today. I started recognizing not only is he present under the appearance of bread and wine, he is present in the appearance of the poor and of all of the stuff that they're dealing with as well. And that's helped launch me and change my approach in life, really, in terms of how I care for them. And so pray that both of those might continue to be awakened in us, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the real presence of him in the poor